Hey everybody, James Nutter here from I Am Wealth. Did you know that 3 of every 4 American families say money is their number one household stress? That means 3 of every 4 of your friends say money is their number one household stress. I too have felt it. I imagine you have felt it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here right now. So that's why we created the I Am Masterclass, a safe space for you to learn with your friends and families how to take control of your money without making critical mistakes. And so thank you so much for being here. And please visit us at iamwealth.com. We offer free financial wellness diagnostics, have a bunch of great resources on there for you. And without further ado, let's jump into the masterclass. You know, Andrew sounds so good on the microphone. I don't even want to do my introduction. We just hand it right to you. No, I'm just kidding. All right, sweet. Let's jump in. Let's do this thing. If I lose audio at all, just let me know. But welcome everybody to another Life Well Lived, a Physician's Guide to Wealth Masterclass. This will also be dual purpose as a podcast as well. Same title, same name. I'm James Nutter, your host, fiduciary financial advisor and partner at I Am Wealth. And whether you're joining us live or listening to the replay on our podcast in the future, I want to thank you first and foremost for your time and attention, as it's definitely the most valuable thing that you have. And if you're here in real time, we're grateful you showed up. We just had an I Am Wealth personal record. I think we had 130 physicians register for this. So we're super grateful for you guys and super grateful for everybody here. And like Andrew said at the beginning, if you get, topic of student loans, like if you build it, they will come. So thank you all for being here. And thank you for investing back into yourself, as that is no doubt the best investment you guys can make. So let's get started here. You did everything right. Med school, residency, the job, the loans, the income. But now with 6 figures of student loan debt and new rule changes every single month for what feels like the last 18 months, why does everything still feel so unclear, right? You're not alone. And we've talked to dozens and dozens and dozens of physicians that said, like, I feel like I should have figured this out by now, but I don't know anything. So 3 of 4 American families say money is their number one household stress. And when you add student loans, high income, and conflicting financial advice out there, it definitely gets significantly worse. And Medscape typically reports that 42% of physicians report burnout and depression year after year after year, with the top cause always being like lifestyle or something financial related, of course, work as well. So between the SAVE plan, PSLF uncertainty, refinancing decisions now with interest rates coming down, and all the sweeping legislative changes with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, so most doctors and most out there are flying blind. And here's the truth, one wrong move could potentially delay your forgiveness, or could cost you, maybe additional payments in mistakes. So we get it. Many of the physicians we serve have felt the same way. We have even felt the same way, Jeff and myself. We coach physicians for a living. We work for about 90 families right now. And we had to go find Andrew through our friend John Apino so we could solve this student loan issue, because it's been such a challenge for, the last year for us. So, many of our clients have felt overwhelmed by the noise. They felt frustrated that their servicer couldn't give a straight answer with all the different phone calls that they made. We had some clients who probably called 15, 20 times in the last 8 months and got different answers to every single question that they asked, depending on, who the person was that they talked to, right? So they felt unsure if they were already making mistakes that they couldn't undo. We have some clients right now that are at 120 payments and just in limbo, right? But kind of what we found and why we found Andrew is that with the right playbook and the right people in your corner, clarity is absolutely possible for you. So that's exactly why this masterclass exists today. And today we're going to show you, or Andrew's going to show you, how the SAVE plan has changed again in 2025 and how it affects your monthly payments, what the One Big Beautiful Bill Act is and what it means for your student loans as a physician, all the updates and changes on PSLF. And is it more accessible? Is it more fragile? What is the current state of PSLF based on how Andrew sees it? Whether refinancing right now is the right move. So if you're with a private practice or PSLF is an option for you, you absolutely want to continue and stay and listen to this as well. And essentially just how to clean up your strategy, whether you're brand new or years into repayment. So just kind of give you that roadmap going forward. And a little bit more, just, at I Am Wealth, like I shared before, we currently serve 88 physician families across the country. Over the last 3 years, we've had more than 800 physicians register for our master classes, and we created all of this for free with one simple goal: is to give you better financial content than you could find for for free online versus some like paid course that you have to go take or buy online. And that is essentially just to like earn your trust, right? So everyone who registered today will get our PSLF hacks checklist and master dashboard for physicians. And then also too, everyone that registers for our master classes will get a free financial wellness diagnostic. We're already sold out for September, so we're looking at October for that. And then we'll have a fun little like special deal with for those who want to meet with like the star of the show today, Andrew. He'll do something fun for everybody that registered for this as well. And just a quick disclaimer: I Am Wealth does not offer individual financial advice outside of a formal fiduciary agreement. This session is educational in nature. If you have personal questions about your specific situation, visit iamwealth.com to learn more. And none of this is like formal legal, tax, or financial advice. I would recommend meeting with a professional like Andrew, meeting with someone like us, or meeting with your team of professionals that surrounds you to have the conversation and get specific answers tailored to your situation. So let's dive in. You're about to hear from one of the most trusted student loan experts in the country. Like I said, we were lucky to get connected through him, through our friend John Apino. And he's a co-founder of studentloanadvice.com and is a trusted resource affiliated with the White Coat Investor, where he serves as the principal consultant. He's advised on over $1 billion in student loan debt for more than 2,900 doctors, dentists, and high earners across the United States. His passion for this work started when he and his wife were trying to figure out how to pay off her nursing school loans, so something near and dear to his heart. And today he helps physicians just like you make smarter, clearer decisions every single day. And he calls himself a wannabe triathlete. I think Jeff played some college football. I played some college football. I think we're all like fairly washed up now. But in a student loan nerd. And when he's not advising people on how to get out from beneath their debt, he's golfing, mountain biking, skiing, and spending time with his wife and 3 kids under 5. And his best piece of financial advice is take advantage of compound interest and the 8th wonder of the world. Golfing, mountain biking, and skiing. I might have to come out west also and visit you. And then you also hear Jeff McPherson is here. He has a CFP license, and he is the founder of I Am Wealth. Jeff has like taught me everything I know about life and money and financial planning and how to run a business. So, Jeff, welcome here as well. And let's get into it. I think everybody here is probably more excited to hear from you, Andrew, than me. So I'm going to stop talking and hand the baton over to you. Hopefully, I didn't miss anything.
No, well, thank you so much, James. Thank you so much, James and Jeff, for allowing me to be here, and for everybody that's taken the time to be here today. This is a great investment into your future, and hopefully this is a helpful session for you. All right, and I just wanted to, so let me go ahead and get my screen, share this here, and as well as I think another thing I want to make sure, can you see my screen okay? Can you give me a
Everything looks
thumbs up?
great.
Okay. And then, the duration of the presentation, I think it's about 30 minutes or so, maybe 40 minutes. I did want to leave some time for Q&A. And James and Jeff, if it's okay, if anybody that is interested in asking questions can just drop a message in the chat here on Zoom, then I will go through all of those questions at the end, if that's okay. Does that
And
format work for
Andrew,
you?
the fun thing with compliance in our industry is we're not allowed to have chat on Zoom. Compliance
Got it.
typically runs about 5 years behind. Sorry, compliance team. I know you're listening to this in the
Okay.
future. So at the end, I came up with some questions, but if you do have a question, you'll actually have to like come on live
Okay.
and share.
Okay, no problem at all. Well, thank you for clearing that up. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. I know you had already covered the disclaimer, right? But not belabor this, but this presentation is for your information and entertainment only and does not constitute formal, personalized financial accounting or legal advice. And you can double check a resource such as studentaid.gov. Okay, so one of the big points I want to hit on here is how would your life change if student loans weren't a constant worry? That's what we're going to be talking about today. How to worry less about these loans. Okay. I already gave a little background on me and how I, came into married into medicine. And that's how I found my way helping out healthcare professionals like yourself to navigate all of this. So I do run a company, studentloanadvice.com. We'll cover a little bit more on that in a special deal where we're going to take $50 off of our consultation price of $579 for anybody that is interested in sitting down and getting a one-on-one consult with us, where we'll talk about everything from PSLF, refinancing, how to file taxes, what payment program is optimal for you to help save you time and save you money. Okay.
And Andrew, we'll be sure to get an email out with all your like website and contact information when we're done too.
Yeah, wonderful. So, here's what we're going to talk a little bit more about today. Some 101. We're going to talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. We'll talk about how to physicians manage their loans, when to refinance, and how to make a plan. And we're going to try to tailor this to, some of the recent changes that have just occurred from the federal government. Because there's been a lot of change in the last year or two. I mean, even, a lot of these questions that you've been getting over the last 6 months, where it changes, and it has been, it's necessary to stay up to date on all of this. So, just a little bit on the federal student loan front here. So, everybody listening today, I think, is anybody, I guess, everybody's attending, I think, in practice right now. Maybe we have some residents online, but is that
We
right?
probably have a pretty broad mix.
Yeah, I would say it's a mix.
Maybe even some medical students, but mostly going to be residents, fellows, or attendings, I would think.
Yep.
Okay. So if you're still in medical school right now, you can borrow federally, and there's really these direct federal student loans that you're going to be borrowing right now. And if you are not in medical school yet, if you're starting in 2026 or later, it's going to be a little bit different for you how much and what kind of loans are going to be offered for medical school. But as a general rule, there are Stafford and there are FFEL. So if you've been borrowing in 2010 or later, everything you've been borrowing are direct loans. Federal student loans have 4 key protections. They have a plethora of repayment programs that we're going to cover. There is loan forgiveness options. Of course, we'll spend some ample time there on things like public service loan forgiveness. But there's also some real nice protections wherein you can put off making payments, particularly when you are in school as well as in your training program. Now, should you do that is a real good question. And I would usually recommend against putting off payment even when you're in your training and income's a little bit tighter. And that's because there are programs such as income-driven repayment that can offer you very reasonable payments while you're in training, usually anywhere from $100 to $400 per month. Okay, but there is forbearance and deferment, and that is you can usually defer. They just changed the rules on this. It used to be 3 years of forbearance that would allow you to put off making payment. Now they're going to tighten that down, where over a period of 2 years, you can get into forbearance for 9 months. And that is where you temporarily put off making payment. But typically, I try to stay out of forbearance because you're not getting credit towards any forgiveness program generally when you are in a forbearance, as well as any of the interest that accumulates on the loan while the loan is in forbearance. When you exit that forbearance, it compounds, or it capitalizes to the loan balance, which makes it so it grows a little bit quicker. Okay. There's also death and disability discharge, and that is in the event you are totally and permanently disabled, or heaven forbid, you die before your loans are paid off, they're not passed to a partner, a spouse, or your children. With federal student loans, these are discharged. So there's a nice protection there with the federal loans. So let's cover a little bit on the different repayment programs. And really the top 4 are what I call time-based options. We won't spend a ton of time on this because this is changing like as we are speaking right now. There used to be 4 time-based options: standard, that was generally over 10 years; graduated, that was 10 years of payments, but they step up every 2 years; extended, that was 25 years of payments fixed; as well as the extended graduated, where payments start out a little bit lower and increase every 2 years. Well, this is all going to be wrapped up as one plan that is called standard, which for most physicians will be over 25 years. The time frame on the length of repayment is contingent upon your balance. If you owe up more than $100,000, which is most doctors, well, it's going to be over a 25-year period of time. There's also income-driven repayment, or what are called IDR plans. And there was 4 different income-driven repayment programs: income contingent repayment, income-based repayment, pay-as-you-earn pay, and saving on invaluable education save. This is also going through consolidation, okay? And we're going to talk a little bit about, well, what's going to be left over here in the future and, some nuances that you need to be aware of there for those repayment programs. As well, if you've got a big chunk of federal student loans, you really need to learn the ins and outs of these programs and the different rules and, who can qualify for them and what your payments look across those. And if you don't want to dig into the details, sit down with Jeff or James, they know this stuff really well, or you can sit down with us to help you run through this. So with income-driven repayment programs, payments have almost nothing to do with your interest rate. They have almost nothing to do with the size of your loans. They are based on the number of people in your family as well as your income. So before we get into more of the income side of things and how the payments are going to shake out, I just want to show a little graphic that is representative of how the programs used to be before the OBBBA. That is the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Okay, that acronym there. And we had time-based and we had income-driven. And you had about 9 different payment programs, okay, that was pre-OBBBA. And then if you go all the way over to the gray block here, you'll notice that the time-based options are consolidated. And the income-driven plans really depend, and it depends on when you borrowed. If you're already done borrowing for medical school, you're either going to have the option for income-based repayment, and it has 2 different versions, and we'll talk about that, as well as what is called Repayment Assistance Plan, RAP. Those will be the only income-driven option plans available for the foreseeable future. If you are still in medical school, if you have not even started medical school yet, there's a real good chance the only income-driven option that is going to be available to you is called RAP. And that's because if you disperse a loan or you do a direct federal consolidation on July 1st, 2026 or later, it will be the only income-driven plan available to you. So let me show you how this would manifest itself for a doc who's making $300,000 and has $350,000 of student loans. $350K of student loans, I know that sounds like a lot. That's the average balance that I work with every single day. And some of you may have a little bit more and are wondering, how in the world am I going to pay this down? You can 100% do this. Okay, so let's just break this down. Let's suppose you're married and you're the sole earner in your household. Well, in the RAP plan, that would be about $2,500 a month would be your monthly payment. If you're in the income-based repayment program, it kind of depends. Are you eligible for the old IBR or are you eligible for the new IBR? And if you're eligible for the old IBR, you might have a higher payment than you would if you were in the RAP plan. So generally, when you're looking at which payment program you want to get onto, if you qualify for new income-based repayment, that's going to likely be the more affordable option than the RAP plan. But if you're eligible for the old income-based repayment program, then maybe you really want to give strong consideration here to the RAP plan. And then you'll notice on the far right-hand side there's the standard plan. That one doesn't change as household size goes up and goes down. As household size increases, you get a little bit of a larger deduction for student loan payment purposes. $50, $100 difference per month roughly is how that shakes out as you have children, okay? But with the standard plan, it's time-based, right? Think of it like a mortgage. That one will not fluctuate over time, relevant to your income changing as well as your household size. So another key thing that you may be wondering is, should you do a direct federal consolidation? If you just graduated from medical school and you're in your residency program right now, or you are coming up on graduating next year, I really want you to look into doing this. And that's because a direct federal consolidation is super helpful for those that are interns because it allows you to take FFEL loans or maybe Perkins loans and move them into get them eligible for public service loan forgiveness, as well as it allows you to get out of this grace period. And that is a 6-month runway where if you graduate in May, you don't have to move into repayment until November. The issue with that is those months that pass in grace period are not getting any credit towards public service loan forgiveness. You're not getting any credit towards, or really making any payment towards the loans. So really want to, look into doing a direct federal consolidation if you are just have graduated med school or are going to, here in the near future. Okay. Now, there are a little bit of downsides in doing that. And what it does is it does capitalize the interest on the loan, which is kind of inevitable anyways, as well as it does ever so slightly raise the interest rate. So let's take a doctor who borrowed $300,000, about 50 grand for undergrad and 250 for medical school. You look at all these different loans, and through a direct federal consolidation, it just lumps them all together nice and neatly into two loans. And you'll notice the balance doesn't change, but the interest rate does ever so slightly go up. That is because they rounded up 1/8%. Now, this is usually very minuscule and minute and is worthwhile if you are doing loan forgiveness, because it could also mean, 5 or 6 less payments over the full decade towards public service loan forgiveness. So usually it's a good idea to, do this right when you've graduated. If you're a couple years out, I probably wouldn't do it though. Because sometimes when you consolidate, after you get out of residency, 3-4 years out of medical school, it could reset your clock back to 0. So let's delve a little bit more into, how do these different repayment programs work? So income-based repayment, this has been around since about 2007, 2008. So, 17, 18 years now that this plan has been around. Previously, it was the only income-based program that you could get onto if you had what were called FFEL loans, Family Federal Education Loans. That program was really discontinued back in 2010. Okay. Payments are 15% of discretionary income if you borrowed a loan before July 1st, 2014. And if you didn't start borrowing before July 1st, 2014, it would be 10%. And this is a real big deal, okay? Because that's going to kind of determine whether or not you're going to do IBR or you're going to want to do RAP. You want to be on the payment program that tends to be the most affordable, okay? It also has a maximum monthly payment that is based on what is called the standard 10-year plan. And it has a taxable forgiveness program, which is over 20 years if you started borrowing kind of post 2014, and it's over 25 years if you started borrowing before July 1st, 2014. Okay, payments in this program could count towards the PSLF program if you're working at a non-for-profit institution, but generally it requires a partial financial hardship. What that means is usually you needed to enroll into while you were still a resident or a fellow before your income perhaps jumped above your student loan balance. That requirement is being eliminated. So part of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it is eliminating that income threshold that you need to meet to qualify for IBR. So even if you'd never applied for it previously and you've been sitting on the SAVE forbearance, know that there will be an option for you to migrate into the income-based repayment plan. Okay, so let's talk about the RAP plan. This is the newest one. It's the newest iteration of the income-driven repayment programs. And yes, they kind of keep changing these things. I feel like each president, it kind of leaves their stamp on this. We had repay back in 2012, 2015, around there, and then you had the SAVE program that was rolled out by the Biden administration. Well, RAP is kind of the Trump's version of student loan repayment programs. It's similar to the previous repay and SAVE program. However, payments scale based on the percentage of adjusted gross income without a maximum. So say you're making $60,000, $65,000 as a resident, your payments would be 6% of income. Say you're making $85,000 and your payments are 8% of income. And then, if you're making above 6 figures, like most physicians are, then it's going to hit that 10% of income threshold like many of the other programs do. Now, it is based on adjusted gross income. It's not based on what is called discretionary income, like the previous income-driven plans, and that's where there is sometimes about $100 or $200 monthly difference from the other payment programs. This one has a taxable forgiveness program, but it is over 30 years. So this is longer to do the non-PSLF forgiveness track. Payments on this program can also count towards PSLF. But here is the key differentiator with RAP. Subsidized interest will occur if your payments are lower than your interest. Okay, so for example, say your interest is $1,000 a month and your required payment as a resident is $200. The unpaid interest of $800 is waived. So that means as long as whenever you get into RAP, even if you make the minimum payments, your loan balance would never grow. It would only go down, stay kind of flat or go down over time, which is a real nice provision. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about some of the news that James was talking about earlier about the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. We're going to do a little bit of lightning round here. So the first thing is the SAVE program. 7 million people have been in the SAVE program. 99% of my clients that I'm working with these days are in SAVE, and they're trying to get out of it and trying to decide, what should I do? Well, what has happened was interest started on August 1st, 2025, and that's kind of provoked a lot of people to look, should I stay in SAVE? Should I leave it for another payment program or just wait until they force me out? Another thing, the last year in the SAVE program is not initially counting towards any forgiveness program. Okay, and I know that's real disheartening, and ideally there's some way that you could buy back this time. But if you are, you really want to start the clock again for forgiveness and you don't want to keep waiting and potentially spin your wheels, maybe you look at getting out of SAVE into another payment program. And we don't know the exact timeline on when that is going to be shut down, but we know that it'll be around no longer than July 1st, 2028. Okay, I think it'll be shorter than that when it'll be eliminated. So the Big Beautiful Bill Act that was passed on July 4th, as we had talked about earlier, it consolidates all the existing repayment programs into two: income-based repayment and RAP. RAP is going to be the only option available to those that are borrowing on July 1st, 2026 or later. RAP is generous, but it was not as generous as that previous SAVE program. And here's a little context on where the puck is going as far as student loan program changes for those that are starting medical school in 2026 of July and beyond. They are capping the amount you can borrow federally, which is going to entirely change the game for student loans and just borrowing in general. Currently, you can borrow up to the sticker price. Say your medical school is $80,000 for tuition, and then you take out $30,000, to live, to cover your room and board. That's $110,000 federally that you could be borrowing each year. And that was how the rules used to be. You could borrow up to the sticker price of the medical school. Well, now they're only going to allow $200,000 federally, which can be borrowed at an amount of $50,000 per year. So that means a lot more docs and students are going to be taking out private student loans to finance their education, as well as those that are going to graduate school beforehand. It's only $100,000, and that one also had no caps on how much you could borrow. So real big changes coming for those folks. It's going to be a lot less opportunity to do something like PSLF if you got $200K of federal loans versus 3, 4, 500,000 that we see these days. One other program I want to make mention of is called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Buyback Program. The way this works is when you reach a decade of public service employment, not 120 qualifying payments, you can then apply for retroactive credit for the SAVE forbearance or previous months, so maybe your loan servicer had just missed your payments. Okay, this program could rectify this last year, but you can't apply for it until you've been out of medical school for at least 10 years, or usually 10 and a half years is right around the time frame that we see. Now, a point on this is it's currently in a 2.5-year backlog. So the program is kind of an operational disaster here initially. And so what I'm telling clients to do is hope for the best on buyback, but just plan that it doesn't work out. Okay. And I have had some clients in 2024 that qualified for buyback. It worked out pretty well, but after about 3/4 of the Department of Education was laid off, I just don't know that they're really even looking at these applications. This part of the Department of Education apparatus is not working real well. Okay. Let's talk a little bit of strategies now as we kind of move back into the repayment side of things on navigating the loans. Okay, so here's a couple of strategies to help you lower your payments if you're trying to keep your payments low. Well, one of the things is you can contribute to your pre-tax accounts, 403B, 401K, 457, health savings account. These are real neat accounts that you can contribute to that are probably contributing to your investment goals and your family goals that can also help to lower your income. Another thing, for dual earning couples, you can file your taxes as a couple separately to exclude spousal income. Let's suppose that you're in residency and you're making $60,000 per year and your spouse is a full-time pediatrician making $200,000 a year. Well, if you file taxes as a couple jointly, even if your spouse who's the pediatrician doesn't have any student loan debt, their income can still be considered for loan purposes when they're calculating your payment. So at $260,000 of income, that's a monthly payment of about $1,800 a month. Whereas if you file your taxes separately and it just bases the payments on your $60,000 as a resident, well, then it's $200 a month. That can make a world of difference if you're trying to keep your payments low. Another little tip we run into as well. When you go from medical student to resident to fellow to attending, all of these years your income is likely increasing. Well, there's a little trick where you can file an extension on your taxes. And what this does is instead of having to file in April, it now moves back your filing date until October. Well, if you haven't filed your tax return for the previous year, your loan servicer will do a 2-year look back for student loan purposes. So you can actually have payments based on income from 2 years prior that can be very helpful. So say you're making $300,000 this year and you filed an extension on your taxes, so you haven't filed the 2024 yet, and they're still using that 2023 year when you were a full-time resident or half fellow, half resident, they would pull in that income for loan purposes that can help you milk some of these lower income years over time, which can be very helpful if you're doing forgiveness. Let's talk about private loans. So not as commonly used to, finance your education up front. It's a whole lot more common when someone's in training or they're a newly minted attending doctor and they're looking to refinance and potentially lower their interest rate. They're not as flexible provisions with private student loans as there are with federal. And there is a lower likelihood that these are going to be discharged in the event of death or disability. You really got to look into the master promissory. That's the big legal agreement that you have to sign before you take out these kind of loans or you refinance your federal out to private. It is an extremely low likelihood that student loans are discharged in bankruptcy. I've worked with doctors that had gone through bankruptcy proceedings and they still had their student loans after that. I've heard some cases that they have been able to do that, but it's really rare for federal and for private student loans. Okay. With private student loans, they come in fixed and variable interest rates. With fixed, the interest rates don't change over time. With variable, they fluctuate. So as the Federal Reserve tells us here every quarter or so what rates are doing, the private student loans follow that. And I've tended to see that those have gone up recently. Maybe they're going to go down. We'll see where the market goes with that. And I've seen interest rates for private student loans anywhere from 0 to 18%, which is real close to what people are paying on credit cards. And with private student loans, think of it kind of like a mortgage. You can do, time-based options where it's 5, 7, 10, 15, or 20. And sometimes your servicer will also allow you to temporarily be on an interest-only type of strategy, which I'll see more for those that are in residency that are just trying to pay the interest. And then they'll move into more of a standard term over 5, 7, 10, or 15 years. So let's start to introduce some of the loan forgiveness programs. So the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, or PSLF, we're going to spend some ample time there. That's the big gorilla here and where we have seen, I've had hundreds of clients qualify for that program. There's another track called IDR Forgiveness, and that's a forgiveness track that's over 20 to 30 years, and that's for those that are working in private practice that have 3 or 4x student loan balances. So say you're making $250K and you went to law school before you went to medical school and now you owe $750,000 of student loans. Yep, we've seen that before. That may be an option that you prepare for, but after you've paid for 20 or 25 years in IBR or 30 years in RAP, you got to pay a tax on the outstanding loan balance that is forgiven, and they treat it as ordinary income. Okay. There's also a plethora of loan repayment assistance programs based on the state that you work in. There is military. Military has all sorts of repayment assistance options. You can do HPSP, where they just help you right from the get-go as a medical student, or you can even join the service after that as a resident or even as an attending doctor. And all the branches kind of have their own program there, as well as NIH. Are you interested in doing research? NIH has real generous programs if you're working directly for the NIH. You don't have to necessarily work directly for them, and they're usually somewhere in the $40,000 to $50,000 per year in loan repayment assistance. VA has a real nice program where they'll pay about $40,000 per year for your first 5 years, so up to about $250,000, $300,000 in loan repayment assistance, as well as National Health Services Corp. Are you interested in working in a health professional shortage area, fairly qualified health center? a rural clinic, and maybe you're working in primary care, maternity care, or, psychiatry, know that's also a real neat program that you can look into as well in select locations. And a lot of those programs, NIH, the VA, and NHSC, you can double dip with the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, because many of those are at non-for-profit institutions as well. So let's talk a little bit about PSLF. It's been around for about 18 years. There's been more than 1 million borrowers that have qualified for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. And I'm still seeing people get their loans forgiven through this. That's been a big question, and a big thought is, hey, with the changing of the political environment, are people still getting this, right? Is this still happening? Yes, it is. And I think anybody that is in the PSLF program is probably going to have a good shot at being able to qualify. For those that haven't borrowed yet, for those starting med school in 2026 and beyond, it's really watered down. Okay, so there's 4 requirements. Number 1, you got to be in a qualifying repayment program. There were 4, now there's just 2. There's IBR and there's RAP. Number 2, you need to make 120 on-time payments. So that's usually at least a decade of payment to qualify. Number 3, you need to be working at least 30 hours per week, and you need to be working for a 501c3 or nonprofit. There's an employment certification form that you'll want to fill out once per year on studentaid.gov/PSLF. It's the little help tool there. It's all electronic now. After you've made the 10 years of payments, whatever the outstanding loan balance is, it's forgiven tax-free. Most residencies and fellowships qualify, are under as our academic positions, but there's a lot of doctors that are not directly employed by 501c3s. You may be part of a surgery group or some practice that contracts with a hospital. That generally does not qualify for PSLF, except there are 2 caveats. If you are practicing in California or practicing in Texas, you can be part of an entity that contracts at a non-for-profit, and you can now qualify for public service loan forgiveness. This is a huge, huge thing, and I've seen lots and lots of docs in those states that had never qualified previously that are now able to qualify. Okay. Now, there's also VA, military, academics, public health. Those are all kind of the usual suspects for loan forgiveness, but know that there's a fair amount of options that you can work out and qualify. Why does it work? Why does somebody do it? Well, generally, there's very affordable payments during training, and roughly the amount forgiven is what you owed at the time you graduated from medical school. It is almost always the best option if you qualify, but it's not a bad idea to set up a side fund. That is to offset the legislative risk if the government was able to uproot it, or if maybe you don't end up working at a non-for-profit or qualifying post-training. So let's talk a little about what's happened with the success rate of the PSLF program here. It's been around for 18 years. Initially, there was a lot of issues with the program, and not many people were getting their loans forgiven. They're just a few thousand, and then you'll notice this absolute J curve. And now it started to kind of taper off a little bit. But bottom line, there was a big time improvement. There was some waivers that had gotten people over the line that hadn't qualified previously, as well as just a lot more people are applying now, and the information has gotten out there a lot better that this program can work, and the application process is now all electronic. That has really helped to work and streamline a lot of this. And I was just looking at the data the other day. It's about 1.1 and change that have now qualified for the PSLF program. Okay, so we know where things are as far as the student loans. 26 years ago was a different situation. You could come out of medical school with $120,000, and you could probably pay that off as a year or two as an attending, and it doesn't really set you back. We know where this is going. It's 240, it's 200K, federally, and I know that there's a lot of docs that have interest rates that are even higher. Okay, so it's imperative for you to understand what should I be doing with my student loans to not let this kind of hold me down financially for a while. Another thing too is if interest rates are dropping here in the future, the government doesn't refinance them for you. Say you borrowed at medical, you borrowed for medical school last year and it was 8%, and rates go down 3%. They're not going to lower them to 5%. Those interest rates stay fixed over the life of the loan, which is, there's some good and bad in that. So let's talk about how does a physician take all of this knowledge about different repayment programs and decide on the path for them. There are really 2 paths. It is as simple as this. We either pay them off or we do a loan forgiveness program. And how do you select that path? Well, a great determinant is looking at your debt to income ratio. Suppose you have $300,000 of student loans and you're making $300,000 now as a practicing physician. That's a debt to income ratio of 1 to 1. That's generally where, you know what, you may end up wanting to look at refinancing the debt, okay? Or maybe you make 450 and your student loans are 200 grand, right? You make 2x what you owe. Well, that's a real good chance where you're probably going to end up refinancing your loans. There's some exceptions to the rule, but that's generally how it's going to shake out. Now, if your debt to income is 1 to 1.5, so now your student loans are a little bit higher than your income when you're out of training. Well, that's where you really got to run the numbers. Should I refinance? Should I do PSLF? And generally those that have longer training. Maybe you're doing a surgical training. Maybe you are doing, GI or cardiology, and you're going to be training for 6, 7, 8 years. Know that a lot of that time, usually all those years are going to be qualifying and counting towards your 10 years. And maybe you only need to work 3 years at a nonprofit, after you get out of your 7 years of training to qualify. So know that the longer you're in training, the higher likelihood you'll end up, sticking it out for the 10 years. And if your income debt to income is 1.5 or higher, you're going to be a real good candidate for public service loan forgiveness. Okay. But another key important factor here is you want to look at the employment that you're looking at post-training. And generally, if you're going to be working at a private practice, caveats in Texas and California, you're going to be refinancing, and those that are working in non-for-profits are going to, stick it out with PSLF. Let's talk about refinancing. Okay. So you want to look at refinancing private student loans from undergrad or medical school as soon as you can get a lower rate. Well, when does that happen? When life situation happens and things change, as far as when you become a resident, when you become a newly minted attending, and then, when you get married to another earner, right? Or, those, or get a new job and you get a raise, right? Those are all the sorts of times when there's a good chance you can look at lowering your interest rate. Okay. That's with private student loans. Refinance federal student loans if you are positive you are not going for PSLF. And, refinancing was a whole lot easier 3 or 4 years ago. Had clients getting 1%, 2%, 3%. Today, they're a little bit higher. They are starting to get better, though, from a refinancing standpoint. I just had a client, she's an internist in private practice. She got 3.85% the other day to refinance her private student loans, her federal loans to privately. So know that things are moving more positively in that direction if you are looking to refinance. But please, if you can have one takeaway from today, you cannot undo a private refinance. That is, once the loans are converted from federal to private, there is no more federal loans. There is no more IDR. There is no more PSLF. Please strongly consider this and really think through your job and what you want to do, because there's no going back to PSLF once you've refinanced your federal loans to private. Okay. And I have been in that scenario where someone had prematurely refinanced when they ended up joining a nonprofit, and it was a $300,000 mistake. So just make sure you're thinking about that beforehand, before you pull the trigger on refinancing. Okay. And so for those
Andrew,
that are in
can I
please, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
One quick thing on that. I know, so we actually, and this wasn't like, we didn't see a ton of this, but we did see, I believe we had 2 families that we were working for in 2020 when the pandemic hit, right? And the Fed dropped rates to try to, artificially just help people, boost the economy. There were a couple people that were actually maybe halfway through their pursuit of the PSLF path, where the math just worked out coincidentally that if they were to refi at that low rate at the time for their individual situation, it actually worked out that even just refinancing was going to end up paying the least amount back between then and the next 5 years. Let's say if the finish line was 5 years out and they refied because rates came shockingly low, it actually made sense. But that's, like you said, extreme caution should be practiced when making that type of decision, because once you bail out on the PSLF path, it's, you can't get it back. But just an interesting thing. So if rates at some point over the coming years were to suddenly drop, dramatically, that would be a great opportunity to reach out to your team or reach out to Andrew and say, hey, what should I do based on my numbers?
Yeah, no, and that's a great point. And then little did we know, in March of 2020, then they just froze all the federal interest rates and they dropped them down to zero. I mean, total outlier case. And so, just this a real good point to hit on, and we can't, speak too lightly about it. It's a very big decision, but a lot of people are doing it too. I have a lot of clients that it makes sense. It's going to save them 50, 75, $100,000 even in some cases to do this and to then just tackle their debt. Okay. All right. So for those that are in training, you can refinance loans while you're in training, and you can usually get a really reasonable monthly payment. You don't have to pay $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 a month. There's a lot of these private lenders that'll give you $100 payments while you're in training. Now, you really only want to do that if you are positive you're not doing public service loan forgiveness, or if you already have private student loans that maybe were 8 or 9 or 10% that you had to borrow in undergrad. Real common is, as I see people refinance in training, they're private loans, but maybe hold off on refinancing while you're in training until you've kind of figured out the job that you're going to take out of training. Okay. So here's kind of a perfect scenario for someone who has $100,000 of private student loans and they're at 10%. Okay, so if they just paid that off over 10 years, they would pay roughly $160,000. Well, what if they could lower the interest rate? That is, refinance them from 10 to 6.5%, saves them over $20,000, right? There's some real low hanging fruit here for you if you already have private student loans. You can also refinance your loans multiple times, and there's no additional cost to you. It does have a little bit of a hit on your credit score, but say you refinance this year and you get 4.5%, and they lower rates next year with a new, Federal Reserve chair, and you could get 2.5%. Know that, it does reset the terms, but it's going to likely be potentially at more favorable terms. So know that you can refinance the loans multiple times once you've already gone down that route. Okay. And here's a quick example of a doctor who is considering doing the public service loan forgiveness program or looking at refinancing. They owe $300,000, and they are, let's say, they're child and adolescent psychiatrist, 4 years of residency, 1 year of fellowship, and they are making real low payments in the pay or income-based repayment program in training. 0, a couple $100, and then when they're making their $300,000 attending income, then you'll notice, okay, they're paying $2,300, $2,400 a month. Well, over a full decade, they would pay $150,000 on the $300,000 that they owed, and then the rest of the loans are forgiven tax-free through public service loan forgiveness. Well, let's say that same physician decides to refinance when they're in their first year of residency, and most can't do that. They can't afford the $3,000, $3,200 payment. But let's suppose they have a spouse who's a high earner that can help them pay, and they refinance right from the get-go. They pay $3,200 per month over 10 years for a total of $380,000. So we're talking about a difference for this doc of almost $250,000 here in the first 10 years of their career. So really give PSLF strong consideration. It warrants every single doctor's consideration, when you are picking your attending job. Now, we know that income and the benefits offered at non-for-profits and private practices can vary vastly across specialty, right? Sure, you can end up working at a job that's a private practice that might be paying you a whole lot better and offering you way better benefits, and you're going to come out ahead, right? But really assess this option when you are looking at jobs. And so this is a real common thing that we run into is we're sitting down with doctors that are picking a new job, and they have a couple of opportunities and they want to know how this shakes out for loans, but know that PSLF can be very beneficial. And I mean, in some cases, it can be life-changing for docs. Okay. So let's talk about all that we've learned today. How do you create a plan? How do you take everything that we've discussed? Well, set some goals, right? Set some goals on how quickly or how slowly you want to pay it off. Take an inventory, get them all written down on paper or on a spreadsheet or on a whiteboard, however you best do it. I'm a spreadsheet guy. Okay. You can download all your federal student loans from studentaid.gov or on one of your federal loan servicer accounts. For your private student loans, you'll need to locate the actual account website and download them, and then just write them all out. It can be really eye-opening to look at the balances, the rates, and what your required payments are, and then create a budget. How much can you allocate rate? Are you doing PSLF where payments are going to be pretty affordable as a resident, and then yeah, they're going to increase a little bit over time as an attending, but should be pretty reasonable? Or are you going to be throwing $10,000 a month at these as just paying this off aggressively? Figure that out. And if you have a big chunk of federal student loans, look at hiring an expert to help you out with this. Okay. So that kind of concludes everything. And to sum this all up, number one, student loans can be tricky, but it's not nearly as hard as your day job. Number two, private student loans are to be refinanced when eligible for a lower rate. Third, you have two tracks, either PSLF or paying them down. And last of all is make a plan or have someone help you with them.
Andrew, you are a wealth of knowledge. I learned a ton today. Like selfishly, I think Jeff and I scheduled this so we could learn firsthand from
Yeah.
you. We know you're busy and like booking out a month, and your time is limited. So that was absolutely fantastic. I think something that Jeff and I've seen that's helped too is like also when you like what you were talking about making a plan. When you know what your other goals are going to cost you, like this is where financial planning comes in, like to retire on time, to send your kids to college, to build your dream house, and to travel every single year. And like what your surplus is and what it's going to take to hit all those, then you can kind of like figure out, okay, what path makes the most sense for me. Or if you can't sleep and you just need to obliterate your loans, you can obliterate, it just kind of is a lot of like personal preference too. We'll open up for questions here. Selfishly, I want to ask one first.
Please.
So we do have, for those, I think like two super quick questions, and then I do want to make sure the audience has some opportunity as well. So for those stuck in limbo on Save Plan right now, I think I emailed you about this. Like IBR, ICR, and pay as you earn are currently counting for PSLF. So if they're on the PSLF track, would you just recommend like jumping on one of those until the RAP plan comes out? I mean, I know you can't make a formal recommendation; it gets a little tricky. Or just what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's a fantastic question because you could wait and you could kind of hold out hope that this buyback program is going to go through, and buyback, if you hadn't certified your income for a long time, your payments could still have been $200 or $300 a month. And maybe you're a practicing doc and you know that when they switch your plans, it's going to be $4,000 a month, right? So maybe all this buyback, this full year of buyback could be at a real discounted rate. Maybe you want to kind of ride the wave a little bit longer, right? So there's definitely that contingency that they're going to hold off. And then you have others that are saying, I want to be back in repayment as quick as possible
Yeah.
to get the train back on the track.
Okay.
I tend to lean towards applying now and
Mhm.
moving payment programs, and that's because you can be moved in a month's time. Like they are churning these applications out as quickly as possible. And I don't know, I just if waiting a whole nother year could mean that it's going to kick the can down the road a whole nother year, I just don't want to do that for my plan. For if I was in your shoes,
Yeah.
I would be applying to switch payment programs unless I couldn't afford the payment. And
Right.
maybe initially, maybe you've been filing separately in previous years and you filed jointly earlier this year and you're like, ooh, that's going to be a real big payment and we can't afford to do it. Well, maybe you wait until February and you file taxes separately and then you go back into repayment. But generally, I'm steering folks towards moving back into repayment on IBR or pay right now to start the clock again.
And can you get stuck in one of those when the RAP plan comes out? Like once you change to it, are you locked in forever?
Yeah, yeah. This is a great question. So one of the things that I don't love about the RAP plan is there is a provision wherein once you enter it, you can't leave it for another payment program.
Okay.
So this is another key point. If you are really considering doing public service loan forgiveness, you need to know, are you going to be better off with income-based repayment, or are you going to be better off with RAP? Because with income-based repayment, you can change. Say they come out with some new payment program with a new administration 4 years from now, you could opt into it, right? You're not stuck with that payment program, whereas with RAP, you are. Okay. Now there are some situations where it's like, well, RAP is going to be great for me and it's quite a bit more affordable than income-based repayment. But that's another key point that you want to consider when you are looking at what your move is. If you're leaving Save or if you were on Pay previously and you're going to have to switch payment programs in the near future.
One last super quick question. We have a couple clients who are kind of, and I think I've emailed you about this too, are kind of in like just limbo land. They're at 120 payments and they're trying to qualify for the buyback. I know it's probably not a one size fits all. Is it, I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? Because I know you said the buyback is kind of a disaster
Yeah.
right now.
So they are at the end of this, and hopefully they're kind of on the front end of the group. I mean, I was looking at a report the other day. There was 70,000 applications outstanding, and they processed 3,000 last month.
Oh,
So I
wow.
mean, I'm not super great at math here, but I'm just doing the numbers. What is that? Almost 3 years, right, of wait time.
Wow.
So, you know, if you are already at the end of this and you are not leaving public service anytime soon, then I could say maybe you just sit tight while buyback's going through. If you're putting in your resignation letter the day you qualify for PSLF, maybe you go back into repayment for a few more months. If you're a couple months shy and you're waiting on 5 months of buyback, right? Because
Right.
you don't want to jeopardize leaving public service and not getting PSLF because you still need to be working at a qualifying institution when you get, to see that application go through.
Hmm.
Okay. So I would say if you're already at the end and you've been waiting for a while, because I have clients that applied in December last year and we're still waiting. But then I have some that applied in November and they got a notice a little while ago, right? But I wouldn't lose hope for those that have already applied. If you're 5 years out, I just don't even know from your 10 years. I don't even know that I would factor it into the math at all.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. All right, let's open up. Sorry, I had to ask a couple of those questions
Oh, no worries.
on behalf of a couple of our clients too. But does anyone else have any questions? I think we got like 4 to 5 minutes real quick if we want to do like a speed round.
I have a quick question. So if you're applying for the buyback and you're waiting the 2 to 3 years because of the delays and like processing applications, you have to sit and wait while you wait for your application, or because like it depends on how many months you have that can be bought back, right? Like I might have some months that I still would have to pay. Like I have 4 separate loans. Two of them are at 17 remaining payments and two of them are at 18 remaining payments. So in my mind, I probably have buyback of at least 12 months, but then I still have some payments that I need to pay. So like, what should I do in that scenario?
Good question, Dr. Theodore. So you can't apply until you have 10 years of nonprofit employment first, right? So that's the first thing you need. And then, so say you're at your 10 years right now and you have 18 months of buyback, let's say. You could sit tight and you could wait, right? You don't have to make payments while the buyback application is processing. You could ask for a forbearance. Now, I hope it works out, right? I hope that it's continuing around, but I know some are going to stay in repayment while it is being processed. That way, whether buyback occurs or they end up just paying the loans off in the 120 months, they're kind of moving towards the right direction.
Thank you.
Yeah, great
So does
question.
that mean, Andrew, that if you need to be at your hypothetical finish line before you apply for buyback?
Yeah, so say Jeff that you're 10 years out of medical school,
Right,
but the last year hasn't counted because of save.
right,
If you fill out
right,
your paperwork, it's going to say you're 108 months in, but you're like, I
right,
got 12 months of buyback. That's when you could apply for buyback, right?
right.
But if I was 5 years out of medical school and I want to buy back this last year, you can't, right? Because you don't have a
Right, right,
decade
right.
of employment yet. But that means right now, if I'm applying, unless this process gets sped up a whole lot, I'm waiting 2.5 years,
Yeah.
hoping that it goes through.
So being that Shayna has 17 months or 18 months of some of the loans remaining, sounds like it may be a situation where you need to like pivot to a new
Well,
payment
I'd probably
plan.
go back into repayment for at least another half a dozen months
Right.
because how much time you have buyback, Shayna? Probably a full year, right? Probably not 18 months. So I'd probably go back into repayment. And then at the end of this year, then you could apply for buyback.
Yeah, because my original
Okay.
forgiveness date was supposed to be January 2026.
Yep. So then
So
you'd apply for buyback in January 2026.
Got it. And then just go to a because I'm in save right now. So come out of save, start repaying, and then try buyback in January 2026.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Great advice. You can't do both at the same time. I was thinking you could do the buyback even if you hadn't satisfied your full 10 years. To try to
Right.
just get
I wish
time.
if that was the case, I'd be telling everybody to apply.
Yeah.
Even if you're 2 years or 3
Just do
years
it
or
both.
4 years,
Right.
even if you're 8 years away, you just got done
Yeah.
with resident, you're 7 years away, right? I'd
Yeah.
be doing it, but
That's great
unfortunately you
information.
can't apply until the end, when you were supposed to be at your 10. So I think we got
Awesome.
time for one more question. So
Okay. Well, yeah, one more question if anyone has one. And Jeff, if you got to jump off, go for it.
Yep. I'll jump off. Andrew, thank you so much. That was amazing. Thanks so much. Everybody on here, check out Andrew. He's the magic 8 ball of student loans.
yeah, and I'll
All
throw
right.
in here too that we do have a special deal. And anyone that heard from us from IM Wealth, they do get $50 off our consultation process. That's $579. So we take $50 off for anybody that heard from us from IM Wealth. So okay.
Thanks, Andrew.
Love it. Thanks.
See you,
Andrew.
Jeff.
See you guys.
Any other questions at this stage?
I have
I was gonna say I have a clarifying question too.
Sure.
Okay, so in December I can apply for buyback, but I have like 7 months because I've been in forbearance waiting for my recertification of my income driven repayment. So if I go back, so if I stay in repayment, submit my buyback application, if I get to those 7 months and I haven't hit my buyback, then do I just apply for public service loan forgiveness then too? Like then it's like 2 separate applications that are hanging out there?
You'll do both, Coriana. So you'll fill out your employment certification in that month because they need to know that you've been working 10 years in public service. That's like the first thing you have to do. And then a week or two, once it's reflected in FSA, studentaid.gov, that you've been working, for 10 years, then you could apply for buyback. Okay.
So even if I have a pending buyback application, I can still just apply for
why do you have
public
another
service loan forgiveness?
Why do you have another pending buyback application?
No. I'm just saying, like, that's my plan. So in December, I'll put my buyback application in. But then if I continue to repay my loans and then by July of next year.
And you stay in repayment. Well,
if I stay in repayment, then
if you submit good question. If you submit
Okay.
another employment certification, it voids the buyback application. And that's okay. And maybe you're like, that's fine. I just wanted to stay in repayment anyways. So then what happens, Coriana, is whether you get buyback or you just end up making those last 7 payments, you're still moving in the right direction here to get your loans forgiven and no longer than middle of next year.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, hey, everyone, thank you so much. I do have to hop off now and get on to a client call. James, thank you so much for letting me be a part of today's conversation. And I wish you all, bottom line, wish you all best of luck and happy to, be of assistance to any of you if you need further help. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew. That was absolutely fantastic. Andrew's already helped some of our clients and done an absolutely amazing job. So I know he's booking out till it was end of September a couple of weeks ago. So I would go to studentloanadvice.com/book if you want to grab a time with him. I'll pimp you out, Andrew.
All right.
All right,
Thanks,
y'all.
James. Have a great
You
week,
guys.
everyone.
Have a great
Take
rest of your
care.
day.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate you. IM Wealth does not offer individual financial advice outside of a formal consulting agreement. Content discussed in the IM Masterclass is not and does not represent financial advice, tax advice, and or legal advice. The intent of the IM Masterclass is to provide extremely valuable financial educational content for free. For personal questions, we hope that you'll visit imwealth.com and schedule what we call a free financial wellness diagnostic to assess the current state of your financial health and therefore help you and your family take control of their money so they can live a more meaningful life. So we'll see you there. IM Wealth does not